WNST want to do serious stories around here, and I think no one covers the Orioles or the Ravens or the Terps better than we do, and the games on the field and off the field, and how all the inner workings of sport work, and the business of sports that I focus on all the time. This guy came into my life earlier this year. I don't know whether it was Maury Brown or Joe Favorito, somebody in the space of business and sports found him on my Twitter feed, and I invited him onto the program. This is his second victimization here of being a part of WNST for a few minutes and laughing a little bit. He is a native New Yorker creating the world's most visible sports brands for 25 years, does design, brand consultation, illustrating, writing, but is an artist of things, uniform, and of logo. We welcome Todd Radom back onto the program. You can follow him out on Twitter at Todd Radom. That's R-A-D-O-M. He has some sort of a weird Minnesota Twins sort of logo going on right now with the TR there instead of the TC that I grew up with Oliva and Carew and those guys, even Burt Blyleven, even though I don't like him from 79 and the Pirates, but that's another story. Todd, you and I crossed paths this weekend. We become Facebook friends and out in the social media space, and I referred to these duds this weekend as pajamas. I see it as such, and I didn't think the Orioles were particularly ugly. My issue with all of this is too much of it, right? I thought the 42 thing beautiful until they're doing it every year, and I don't know who the hell's on the field those nights. I don't really like that one so much. I think there are better ways to honor Jackie Robinson than to confuse everyone watching the game that day about who's playing the game. I still am old school, unlike Paterno, where I like the name and I like a number, and it helps an old guy like me, to delineate whom is whom. And the nicknames really were way over the top for me, but I don't think it's an awful idea. I know it's all for a good cause. I just think there's too much of it going on, and it's starting to sort of get in the way of me watching games on the weekend, honestly.
Yeah, Nestor, I think it's an interesting thing that we're looking at here because, just to kind of look at the core of why they did this. This was one of these areas where the Players Association and Major League Baseball came together, and they don't always come together, as we know.
Or they rarely come together.
Yeah, and in this case, and I do believe this, the core mission here was to, elevate the players and to allow them to express some individuality, which is often stifled. Uniforms are, after all, uniforms. And
for a reason, I might want to point out, so you don't look like a Bad News Bears, practice on the weekend with, Ahmad up in a tree.
And Oregon syndrome, as I call
Buttermaker eating Kentucky Fried Chicken. We can't have that,
No, but listen, I do think that in the case of Major League Baseball, we've got a 162-game season. It's a marathon, of course, not a sprint. So I think for a couple of games, we can have fun and get ugly and get goofy and get those nicknames on there and get neon and get pullovers and have some fun with it. I wouldn't want to see it for more than, I could even argue the fact that maybe 3 games is too many. It could have been 1. But I think anything over and above that is like, we all like a good meal, but if you have too much of a good meal, you're going to get sick.
Todd, I'm 48. I'll be 49 next month. How old are you?
I am going to be 54 next February.
All right, so we're, in a similar company and growing up, in the early 70s and all of that, and, where the Oakland A's were. And if you haven't read Jason Turbo's new book, you should, on the Oakland A's and on Charlie Finley and, his contribution to all of this. Like, Charlie Finley would sit up in his grave right now, look at this weekend and say, as long as they're playing with a Dayglow orange baseball, I know I left the world a better place, because this was right up his alley. Maybe even Vec or some of the old, carnies of Major League Baseball past. But we've been around a long time, you and I, right? And you've seen a little bit more than I've seen. But, on baseball cards and even going back, and there's something wonderfully delicious about, to guys like you and I, about all the old jerseys and all the old flannels and how they can make them more comfortable now. And the fact that I could get an Aparicio red, white, pinstripe 59 go-go socks jersey off of some Chinese thing on the internet. I love all of that, right? But then there comes the actual games being played and how this whole thing started. And I know it was a cash grab. I know there were teams back in the 70s like the Astros and the Padres and the Pirates, and were just just trying to sell tickets and trying to sell disco and trying to be relevant. And I know it's even worse now with football starting this week, where you really see baseball just sort of slide off the map to some degree, and we're even in the pennant race here.
Yeah.
But, I think there is a fine line between doing all of this. I mean, how many of these things do they possibly sell on a weekend? When everybody has every jersey, and these things aren't cheap. They really are. They're a hell of an investment. You want to spend $219 on one of the real ones, It's not like these things are $30 or $40, and you just hit a button online and they come in the mail, as they should be. I mean, they're sort of gougy to begin with. So other than rich people or collectors of the autographed version of your Buster jersey or your Mookie jersey or whatever would be on the back of Swaggy T here for Tim Beckham, I don't know how they're really benefiting financially from it for what it is, which is a real massive distraction on the back end of the 42 and a weekend of baby blue and a weekend of pink and a weekend of military and a weekend of red, white, and blue flags and then the throwbacks. And that, it's too much. And if they did it for one day instead of a weekend, or like the NFL does it on a Sunday, or if they on Mother's Day or whatever, I would get that. But I look up for a whole weekend, and I'm not being an old get off my lawn guy, and I'm not opposed to the funness of it. It distracts from me watching the game. I want to know who the hell's batting, literally. Well,
I mean, listen, let's go back for a minute here. And you mentioned Charlie Finley, you mentioned Bill Veeck. Well, those guys were absolute visionaries, marketing geniuses. Charlie Finley revolutionized the way we watch a baseball game right now, because he injected color into the sport and literally said, when it comes to sports, color is everything. And he was prescient. And of course, Bill Veeck puts out those floppy collared jerseys that the White Sox wore in the late 70s and very early 80s.
The Chet Lemon blue softballs are my favorite. The shorts, the navy blue.
Only worn 4 times, I will tell you.
They were beautiful.
But here's the deal. Back then, of course, that was, it was all about marketing, but it was a very organic time, if you want to look at it that way. These things were not focus tested to death, and they were regular uniforms. And, same deal. I mean, 162 games. But to your point, and I think you struck on something pretty good, if we were talking about this particular players' weekend initiative in a vacuum, well, then we could say, listen, it's 3 games, it's goofy, the kids get into it, we build brand awareness, and we make people aware of these great players who are doing amazing things right now. But when you stack it up on top of Mother's Day and Father's Day, which those initiatives, they do donate money to very worthy causes that affect each and every one of our families, of course. And, but you can have fatigue involved. There's no question about that. And finally, I do think that, when you talk about selling jerseys, I don't know necessarily that that's what this thing is all about. Yeah, that is going to happen. But I think, I always talk about a guy like Mike Trout, right? Mike Trout is doing historic things. Giancarlo Stanton right now is doing incredible things. If either of those guys walked down the street in New York City, how many people would recognize them? The game markets its stars, its most marketable stars, have faded away. Big Papi retired last year. Derek Jeter retired a couple of years ago. There's an East Coast bias involved in that, but just humor me for a minute. So these guys in the sport, listen, I think that's what they're looking to do.
I don't know. The Kershaw walks through BWI here and gets attacked. I mean, they have moved themselves where Tom Brady can't go out of the house, right? And Deion Sanders and Ray Lewis 20 years later can't walk anywhere without being recognized. I walked the streets of China with Cal Ripken 10 years ago, and nobody plays baseball in China, so they don't know him there. And it was kind of a weird sort of a concept because he is as face-on for baseball. But, part of wearing these pajamas, and I do call them that, in a real pejorative sense. I don't know who's sitting in the seat making these decisions for fashion, and all of them. Look, I think individually the baby blues and the pinks and the military, and Lord knows the first time we saw the red, white, and blue and the stripes and all, it was all kind of neat. The fatigue, that's the word. And
yep.
Does baseball feel that, or is that just for an old fart like me that they really should wear 60 times a year whatever pajamas they feel like putting on. I mean, there's a reason they call it a uniform. And, dude, I'm not some militaristic, you know what I mean? I sit left of Bernie Sanders on a lot of issues and probably right at Trump on others. But, when it comes to the uniform thing, I love the old Starburst Astros. I love the old 70s, polyester look and all that. I think there's a wide variety of uniforms I can be down with. I love almost every throwback that doesn't look absurd. Like the Green Bay Packers when they wear those jerseys that they don't look like the Packers anymore.
Yeah.
That to me, that's where I draw the line, and I think baseball should be careful about that. And I don't think everybody.
And listen, I think in the case of that Packers uniform that you just referenced, there's a little bit of a distinction. It looks kind of absurd, but it is really a part of their heritage. It's part of their DNA, whereas these player weekend uniforms that we're discussing now are just total, pie-in-the-sky fabrications that really don't harken back to anything having to do with the past. I think that's kind of the goal. And I do think that we're going to be entering a new era here. Not to cross-reference caps and jerseys, but of course Baltimore's very own Under Armour is going to be manufacturing the uniforms for Major League Baseball starting in a couple of seasons. And, they are, of course, famous for doing what they do in the college football space most visibly. So, they have a hand in the future of the game, of course, with MLB and the clubs being the gatekeepers. But, listen, we could see some real changes on a permanent basis.
When you see the designs of these things, just the fact that they sent the Orioles out with white lettering on the gray, I mean, as a designer, which is what you are, Todd, would you ever, I don't know how that passed the sniff test. I mean, for all of them, there were colors, and some of them were interesting, and, I thought what the Houston Astros wore was a little bit weird. I thought what the Mariners wore was a little bit, I looked at them. You want it to look a little bit like a cousin of the main thing, and maybe not as weird as the color rush is in the NFL. And that's their version of their Thursday night goofy mustard and ketchup and relish-looking jerseys. But when it came to the Orioles, when I thought they were fine. I didn't think they were particularly ugly. I just thought, why the white lettering? Like, how does that pass the mustard there? Yeah,
I think it was having nothing to do with any of this, Nestor. So I'm just kind of like taking a stab at this. I don't think it mattered. I think that whereas we would normally think about visibility and how this stuff looks on broadcast and how it looks on TV and how stuff embroiders, I don't think that any of that was consideration. I think that in a fun way, the folks who put this together, which I guess, Majestic and MLB, they said, let us blow this out. Let us just throw this out there and, just have fun with it. And I think to your point also, the Orioles were actually pretty staid looking, if you want to even look at it that, compared to a couple of the other clubs that were just really, really blown out. But of course, what we haven't talked about is the fact that, I'm in the New York area, and I certainly know many Yankee fans in my life, and I am not a Yankees fan, who are clutching their pearls at the very, at the fact that there were names on the back of the uniforms, much less the colors and the optics of it.
Well, you can go check him out online. Todd Radom does all things uniform and design out of New York. You can follow him at Todd Radom. That's R-A-D-O-M. And, I was going to give your credentials, but I was talking to my wife because we were watching these guys in their pajamas on Sunday, and you commented on the thread that, hey, for the Orioles, they played the best baseball of their season at Fenway Park in those pajamas, so maybe they should wear them on a more frequent basis, that they will always be smiled upon here for what they represent, and I don't know that they're coming back anytime soon. But I said, I got an expert for everything, and this guy is like the uniform expert. What do you do? And you've played a part in logos and a lot of things that we've seen as fans, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been working in the professional sports space for 25, 26, 27 years. It gets to be a long time at this point. And I've designed Super Bowl logos. I have designed team identity packages, uniforms, commemorative packages, just created the look of the Big Three basketball league for Ice Cube recently. So, all this stuff kind of crosses over. And, I am very deep into it, for sure.
Is that Amy Trask's league? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
She is the CEO.
I'm going to have to grab Amy, get her on the program here before we go out and play the Raiders in a couple of weeks and get some insights from her. So did you give them thumbs up or thumbs down? Like, I mean, in a general sense, you having done this your whole life, when you see the color rushes and you see sort of the weirdness, not throwback, because throwback has nothing to do with you, me, or anybody else. If the Cardinals are going to wear their 1954 jerseys, they're going to look kind of cool and kind of authentic, and they're going to do a nice job. I love all of that, but that's been lost a little bit in all of the pajamas that we're wearing, and the Orioles wearing black things on Friday night, and warm-up looking things some of the time. I do love the throwback thing, but then when there's this new creativity that's out there, a guy like you must really look at this and look at every sort of line on the piping, right?
Yeah, you really do. And again, which I said earlier, when you think about this stuff, especially in this day and age where we've got high definition and you go to a game and the scoreboards, these LED scoreboards are just incredibly gigantic and well-defined. The criteria of really looking at every piece of trim and every detail and where things were and how big the outlines are around numbers and stuff like that, we're evolving right now. But listen, this has evolved several times, certainly in my career, in the early 90s, and both of us remember this, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners will. It was a time when technology changed as far as us designers doing what we do. And what did it result in? It resulted in a lot of colors, too many outlines, snarling animals, all kinds of stuff like that. Very trend-driven color palettes. I mean, the look of the 90s was all about teal, black, silver, right?
Purple.
Purple, yeah, exactly. And, of course, that's not going to work for the Orioles. The Orioles, for one reason or another, never really strayed from their roots, and that's probably a good thing. But if you are
neither of the Tigers or the Red Sox or the Yankees
right.
for the most part.
I mean, you can paint around the edges, but
why are you
don't
screw
blow
with
it
the
up.
Dodgers? I mean, how do you fix that? What are you going to do with the St. Louis Cardinals? I mean,
there's no reason to. Hey, look, in the case of the Cardinals, they added an alternate jersey a couple of years back, which just it looks like it should have been there the whole while, and it was very warmly received. Still has the birds. It has the word St. Louis on it. It's cream-colored. It's just great-looking, and it looks like the Cardinals.
I love when the Giants went to the off-white. It's just something about that said, man, that says McCovey and Mays to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And listen, so along those lines, the Diamondbacks, who have done some pretty crazy things, or their expansion brethren, the Rays in Tampa, doesn't work for them necessarily. You look at a team like the Blue Jays, which a couple of years ago kind of went back to their original look, but updated it, and I think it's a really successful, it's not an exact carbon copy of what they wore in 1977, which I loved, by the way, but it updates that, and it stays true to the DNA, and it looks like the Blue Jays. It's probably where they should have been all along.
I love the Blue Jays gear right on up until they started kicking our ass in the mid-'80s. Then I didn't like it
Well, that's going to make a difference. And like Jerry Seinfeld said, right, we root for the laundry. We're not objective in the least when it comes to this stuff.
No doubt. I mean, Tony Gwynn wore 5 different versions of Padres gear, but the only one that's real is the brown and the mustard, like the rest of them.
And it's funny because there was a time that he said early on in his career, listen, the brown and mustard are ugly as sin, but it's us. And I think a lot of Padres fans feel that way. But listen, the navy blue and orange that he wore was a really good look. So, the Padres, I mean, this could be a whole nother, Nestor, we could talk about the Padres alone for hours.
Oh, and throw the Astros in there, too. And they've had so many good ones, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like the Rays or the Diamondbacks have had a lot of really good ones, you know what I mean? Like, the Padres and the Astros, for as much as they've changed, it's like the Atlanta Braves. They've had a couple of different ones. They've all been kind of cool, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. And actually, the Braves, if we recall, and some of your listeners are probably too young to recall, but they've seen pictures of it. When Hank Aaron hit his record-breaking 715th home run, he's wearing a blue jersey with a white jersey rather with blue sleeves and a white and blue paneled helmet, and that was a great look. I mean, it was pretty classy, actually. There were a lot of garish looks back in those days that were just too much of everything. this thing was pretty refined. It wasn't too many colors. It looked like the Braves still. And I think I love those uniforms.
What's your favorite uniform, like, through your lifetime? What's your
Holy smokes! How do you answer that question?
You got to pick one, man. No. This is like picking your favorite Billy Joel song or your favorite Springsteen song. You got to have one, man. You got to have one.
One? I don't have one, but I can name a couple of them for you. And let's keep the baseball over here. I am a traditionalist, so the very austere, stripped-down Detroit Tigers home jersey. Okay. I mean, that's a classic. You can't improve upon that. And I'm not necessarily a Yankees fan, but I respect the pinstripes. But then, like sometimes you want some steak, sometimes you want some seafood or chicken. How about those Astros jerseys from the 70s? Because they are just joyous. They speak to a place and time. They are not, I just love those things. And then I'm a fan of the powder blues and the Expos. I mean, as a kid, I always remember looking at that logo and those uniforms and thinking to myself, geez, this team looks like they come from a different country.
That was nice to see all that up on the hill at Cooperstown last month, I must admit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, that was, and it's funny because I was in Montreal last weekend, just for a couple of days of vacation, and you do see people walking around with the caps, and that's such a great city, and it's a big city, and they probably deserve another franchise or a shot at a franchise at some point when they can make a stadium work, but it probably shouldn't be called the Expos, and it probably shouldn't have that same logo, and I think about that with the Nationals, which I had a hand in, but the curly W to me, as a guy of my age, I still think about the Senators.
Well, when it comes to the Expos, I'm a little heartbroken unto myself because I went up there a few times back in the day. I never saw a game there. And I know, from chatting with some folks in Toronto, the Blue Jays play that sort of weird weekend up there before opening day. They've played a couple of games up there to big crowds the last few years. And I'm sort of circling that in early spring to say, you know what, I'm going to go up to Montreal and see a game at Olympic Stadium just because I never did. And I'm a nerd like that. And
I would totally join you for that. And I am the kind of nerd that when I was in college and right out of college, I had a couple of buddies of mine, and we would take these baseball road trips,
of course,
and we would literally rent a car in Jersey and drive to Kansas City for a 3-day weekend.
Did that several times myself. Yes, I'm
fully. And you can't beat it. And so, as far as that goes, I was lucky enough to have seen a couple of games at Olympic Stadium with the Expos, and at your Memorial Stadium back in the day too.
All right. Well, we all have the memories, and I don't know what these futuristic things did over the weekend, and Machado wearing Mr. Miami. That will remain to be seen as to whether that pans out for a lot of money 18 months from now. Todd Radom does all things design. You can follow him out at Todd Radom, RADOM. You got a book coming out next year on ugly uniforms, right?
I do, and this is going to be, I'm going to keep, I'll push this as we get a little bit closer. I'm working on it right now, but it's going to come out in the spring. It is tentatively entitled Winning Ugly, and it is a loving homage to ugly MLB uniforms from across the entire history of the sport, but with a very special focus on some of the ones that you and I just referenced.
Well, I'm sure that if all you need to do is go back to the Orioles orange on orange that they replicated a few years ago, that's, if that's not in your book's not.
It's already written about. It's in there. That part of it's locked in. Brooks Robinson Sporting Goods Company.
Oh, man. I mean, there's just that great picture, iconic, of the 420 game winners hanging out there, Cuellar, Dobson, McNally, and Palmer and those duds. And the Orioles went out a couple years ago and wore them. Gonzalez pitched. I remember seeing the pictures of that.
Yeah.
Adam Jones, and boy, were they ugly, right?
Well, and listen, you and I both remember this, and I think it's worth talking about very briefly. But Boog Powell, of course, wears those, and I say he looked like a giant traffic cone. and then he shifts over to the Indians, where he famously refers to himself wearing an all-red Indians uniform, red shirts, red pants, as, quote, a giant blood clot. And I think Mark Belanger actually referenced him as the biggest Bloody Mary he'd ever seen.
All right, man. Well, if they ever put the all-orange back on, you and I will get together and praise them. We will not bitch about them, as I did a little bit this weekend on the throwbacks. Great to have you on, man, and good luck with the book. And anytime bad uniforms are worn, I'm looking for you.
Well, we'll have to talk again about this stuff, Nestor. It's always a pleasure.
I did like the Ravens color rush with the when I see people with the purple Flacco with the gold 5 on it. I think it's pretty badass. That was a really, really good look for the Ravens last year.
Yeah, and you know what? It looks like the Ravens. Some of those some of those color rush uniforms were a little. I'm kind of gagging off to the side over here, but I think in their case it was a pretty solid look.
All right, man. Well, we'll keep it good looking here for the beginning of the season. I'm sure the NFL will be screwing with their jerseys by week 4, too. So
more for us to talk about when the time is right.
Oh, I'm sure you can buy it at NFLshop.com as well. He is Todd Radom, a longtime fashionista of all things Jersey. He's been creating the most visible sports brands for 25 years, and you can find him out on Twitter at Todd Radom, R-A-D-O-M. And always fun to argue about jerseys because there's no winners, there's no losers. There's just good and bad opinions. You can find me out on the Buy a Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. You can also email me anytime, anywhere, nasty@WNST.net. Much like Mr. Angelos, I am a very available individual. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live right here on our Facebook Live as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. If you're headed over to London next month for the Ravens game, make sure you're with us on Saturday in the afternoon from 11 till 3. We're going to be drinking, eating, fish and chipping, and then we're going to be sailing in a cable car across the Thames River to the O2 Arena. We're going to do a little O2 takeover in purple and a march because that's what Ravens fans do. It's not in March. It's in September. It's on the 23rd of September. All the information's up, and you can also email me anytime about that. Don't forget our morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox, all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Last but never least, breaking news, and there's going to be some of that with these Ravens cuts coming up. Obviously, the Orioles going to 40-man this weekend. Stay in touch with all of it on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Colatzos will be here on Thursday driving you home from 3 until 5. If my allergies don't get to me first, I will join him. How about that? I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.